You want to stop your heart pounding and hands sweating and feeling under attack when you get a mild criticism at work. You need to heal the moment. And yes, I know that's my tagline, but stay with me, it'll make sense. So think about if you are driving or you're at work or you're chatting with a family member and out of nowhere, your body goes to full alarm over something that absolutely did not call for that reaction. And you think, why is this still happening when what's in front of me is not really a big deal? Why is my body doing this? Well, it's still happening because your body thinks something terrifying is happening right now. I know that feeling. I lived with a childhood trauma point that sent alarm flares up in my body throughout my entire adulthood. Anytime I thought my world was unpredictable or I faced the tiniest bit of danger, healing that moment of trauma, well, that was the key to finally releasing the core belief I held for my entire life that the universe was against me, and I always had to be braced for the worst. Let me explain. Hi there, I'm Jill Sitnick. I healed my own PTSD with MDMA therapy, and I built a method to heal childhood trauma moments from what I learned during that process. I share this story for you to see that your intense reactions to ordinary events have an origin that can be healed. So when I was 3 years old, my 6'2", 230-pound father beat me pretty severely. And that beating created a core belief that the universe was against me and that I was never safe. Why did that happen? Well, here's something most people who haven't studied trauma don't know about children's development. Kids are wired to believe they are the center of the universe. We are all egocentric till about, 6 to 8 years old-ish. So when something terrible happens to us at early ages, we don't think, oh, that person is out of control. We think, this is my fault. I caused this. I must have done something. There must be something wrong with me. And interestingly, that conclusion gives a child some sense of control because if it's our fault, maybe we can fix it. Maybe we can make it stop. So for over 40 years, I carried the belief that I was somehow responsible for what happened in that room when my father threw me against the wall a few times and proceeded to beat me into the fetal position. I learned that day that the universe was dangerous and out to get me because there was something wrong with me. I learned that men were not safe for me. And I carried those core negative beliefs every single day of my adult life into every room. I walked into every relationship I built with it. So it makes a lot of sense that my nervous system would freak out if I caught even a hint of danger. That's ultimately what led me to psychedelic assisted therapy. Now, here's what MDMA therapy did, and I want to be really clear about this because there's an important difference between what the medicine does and what the integration work does. The 5 hours inside my therapeutic MDMA journey highlighted the trauma that needed to be processed for integration later. It was like the session made a list that said, these are the trauma moments that are ready to be processed and reframed. These are the things your system is prepared to face now. And this beating was on that list after one of my journeys. Now, just a note, we never really know what trauma memories are on that list until they float into our consciousness in the days, weeks, and months after the journey. That's why a solid integration process is so important for trauma healing. What the MDMA session changed was my body's relationship to the memory of being beaten. Before the therapy, the second that that memory came near me, my fear response went straight to a 10, and I had no capacity to stay with it. After the therapeutic work, that same memory could surface, and my body's response was maybe a 2 instead of the normal 10. Because MDMA has this capacity to let old, terrifying memories return almost like you're watching them on a television screen. There's a separation between you and the event that simply wasn't available before. And that 2 instead of a 10 is what made it possible to finally stay with the trauma origin and process it by reframing its meaning to me. This is what people mean when they say doing the work. This is what I did during my integration with my trace process way before I had given a name to the process. I remember I was walking my dog Sadie, who was my best integration partner ever, when this memory of myself at 3 rushed at me the way it always had when something in life was stressful. So I was probably thinking about something at work or something. This time, though, instead of shoving that memory away like I had done 1,000 times, I took a moment. I paused and I got curious. That's the T in trace. Take a moment. I interrupted my automatic response long enough and got interested in what my body was telling me instead of running from it. Then I received the emotion attached to the memory. That's the R in trace, receive the emotion. I let the fear be there without fighting it. And to be clear, I was able to do that because it came in at a 2 instead of a 10. So I was scared, but I was able to be present. That's the toughest part of MDMA therapy to explain to people. Those old life changing fears, they just aren't that scary anymore. And you can process them. Before MDMA therapy, those fears and core beliefs appeared to be like in my bones or just how I was wired. It turns out that isn't true at all. Then I asked, why is this memory showing up right now? What does it need from me? What haven't I finished here? That's the A in trace. Ask where this feeling began. And that question let me get uh, it really let me dive into the fear that had controlled my entire life with all of the knowledge I had amassed in the 40 years I had been alive. I was no longer looking at that memory through the eyes of a 3-year-old. Now, the C in trace is connect with your younger self. So I found her, my 3-year-old self, on the floor, huddled, trying to protect herself with tears streaming down her face. And I asked her if I could come stand next to her. She looked up at me and she welcomed me, hoping I could make her father stop beating her. So adult Jill stepped into that memory and I put myself between her and my father. And this is where the reframing happened. Because standing there as the adult between a 3-year-old child and a 6'2", 230-pound man who is completely out of control, I could see the situation clearly for the first time. I was looking through my adult eyes at a domestic abuser, not through the eyes and the perspective of a terrified child. And here's what was true. This child on the floor had done nothing to deserve this. She was 3 years old and completely powerless in that room. This beating was never about her. This was about a man with no capacity to regulate himself. He clearly had no ability to control his own rage. And honestly, I've come to believe this more and more. Something in my father got energy from hurting people because he did it his entire life. to everyone around him. That's like who he was. That's the truth my 3-year-old self could never have understood at her developmental age. So, with this very obvious truth right in front of me, then I was able to extend to my little 3-year-old what she needed. And that's the E part of trace, extend what was missing. And what that little girl needed was simple. She needed protection. She needed the beating to stop. And she needed to get out of that house. So, with my imagination, I gave her all three. I stepped in front of her and told my father to back up and stop. And in my imagination, he did. And I reached down and I picked little Jill up off the floor. And we walked out of my childhood home calmly, holding hands. That was everything she needed. She needed the beating to stop and the ability to leave that terrifying house. There's a term for what happened in that moment, and it's called memory reconsolidation. Very, very quickly. Every time a memory surfaces, it becomes briefly malleable, meaning it can be updated before it gets stored again. Most of the time, we restore trauma memories exactly as they were with all the same fears attached. But if you can stay present with the memory long enough to have a different emotional experience inside of it, which is exactly what trace creates the conditions for, your brain can store a new version, a version that finally has the adult truth attached to it instead of a younger child's conclusion. That memory of the beating now holds no emotional charge for me, none. And I want you to understand what that means because it is the clearest sign I know of that a trauma point has been healed. The memory didn't disappear. What happened still happened. But when it surfaces now, it is just a piece of my history. It doesn't hijack my body. It doesn't send me back into the belief that the universe is against me or that men are dangerous. It's just something that happened a long time ago to a child who deserved so much better. The MDMA made it possible for me to approach that memory without being destroyed by the fear of it. And the trace integration process is what allowed me to process the trauma point and release its emotional power over me. That's the whole heal the moment tagline explained. I had to heal lots of childhood moments exactly in this way. So if you have a core belief that the world is against you or that things never really work out or that you always have to be braced for something bad, I believe there is a specific moment somewhere in your history where that belief was created. The best part is that I don't think you have to live inside it forever. You just have to find the moment and update it. The trace process lets you do that when your body gives you a full scale fire alarm response inside you. If you have a memory you want to try this process on, I built a guided journal that walks you through every step of trace. It's free. It's at thejourneysage.com/trace. Go ahead and start there. I'll post the link below. So go ahead, heal the moment. Your inner child has been waiting long enough.